okay, jumping back into it. So I closed because I wanted you to digest um, John, the accusations being made against John, allegedly by Dr. Wecht. Dr. Wecht is a long time, was a long time forensic pathologist. And what he is saying in the first video is that he had received some pictures from the National Enquirer, and they're saying, hey, we want you to take a look at this case, let us know what you think. And so he went through the autopsy, and he's giving his honest assessment of the autopsy. There are some other videos that I'm going to look through that go more in detail in this channel named Nancy Drew. This gentleman goes really goes into depth a little bit on the autopsy. And we talked about in previous videos how Patsy didn't want to look at the autopsy, obviously, because, and as some of you have mentioned, she didn't want to look at it because if there was guilt. And Dr. Wecht here is explaining where the guilt might have been pointing toward. Specifically, I'm not saying that John was the, I don't know, that John was the unaliver, but there are some things that seem to point to him. And so this is Dr. Wecht kind of continuing to go into his theories about what happened to JonBenet.
But back to JonBenet and our kidnapper, who gets into the house and who leaves the house and who takes the time, by the way, the pen and pencil.
Oh, yeah.
Pen and paper with which he wrote, and upon that which he wrote.
Oh, and I forgot to do, sorry. I forgot to show love. This recommendation came from Beverly Lawyer. One of my replies in my comments, I think a subscriber came from Beverly, and Beverly, this was when I saw and I like this recommendation because when I saw the video the first time, I watched it through really fast the first time. I think I was on my way to go do something. I watched it through the first time, and I was like, yo, I love this breakdown. I love this analysis. And so this is where this analysis came from, or this is where this recommendation came from. So thank you, Beverly, for that.
Was there in the middle of the night. He went around and found a pen and paper. And by the way, he didn't like the first beginning. He took the notes. He knew that one day it would become a hot item. He crumpled it and threw it to the ground. And then he started all over again, like an English paper, right? And then proceeded to write, "We represent a small foreign faction."
That's what I'm saying. Yo, whoever did this knew let's assume that it was not an inside job. We don't have to, but let's just assume that it wasn't an inside job. I'm saying we're talking about an individual who came in maybe sometime immediately after they left, and no one saw, as some of you have pointed out, the schematics around the house, as it wasn't just on some sort of isolated island. Somebody should have seen, but who knows, because it was the holidays, so everybody could have been gone. Everybody could have, who knows, man, who knows what's going on. So, but somebody could have been like, oh, the Ramseys have somebody coming in to clean. So they may not have thought that. They may have thought it was another handyman or something like that, or maid. So that could have been why. That nobody thought about it, even though somebody was snooping around. But the fact that this person was in the house chilling, who was this that knew your schedule so well that they could be in the house just taking it easy? Oh, you know what? I got a 3-page letter that I need to write down. 3 pages, yo. Do you know by hand, even if you're rushing, how long it takes you to sit down and write a 3-page paper? Never mind that you mess up and start over and ball that up. You got time to mess up.
And by the way, too, the rope that was used to bind her was conveniently found there. And then he, after writing the note in the middle of the night, he leaves. But what did he forget? How's about the body of the girl that you just kidnapped? You took all this time You had the incredible chutzpah to break into this house. You knew where to find this girl. You took your time in finding everything and you decided that after you had that pleasurable, perverted activity, you would also make it a profitable evening and get some money. Well, how's about picking up a 45-pound body and throwing it into the woods or down a sewer, and maybe you get a chance to get some money? This guy, with all of that incredible courage and patience, does all of that and then walks out of the house, leaving the body.
Just
you like
walks
that?
away.
How do you like that story? So if there's anybody here who believes there was an intruder, the next time you all invite me to Bethel Park and I have my own hair, not a wig, and it comes down to my shoulders, that's when they will have found the intruder who killed JonBenet Ramsey. Oh, by the way, it's an excellent question. Do you know that about 6 weeks ago, after all these years, that a reporter out there got hold of, it never been disclosed in all those years, got hold of the grand jury's recommendation. Mm-hmm. The grand jury had recommended that indictments should be brought against both John and Patsy Ramsey. And the district attorney, Alex Hunter, just ignored it. How often do you think that's done? As to who, I'm sorry if I didn't make it clear. It's the father playing, the second game. No intent to harm the girl. I'm not talking about, what we may think of that, and understandably and rightly so. But in terms of, no intent to harm. But I forgot to tell you, I didn't forget, I didn't want to, you know how many murders there had been in Boulder County that year? 1. The year before? 1. They had no experience. Alex Hunter, and I'm not the most prosecutorially biased forensic pathologist by any means. I do a lot of work while I do all the cases for Four Corners and DAs and testify for them in my private consultations. Obviously, most are going to come from defense attorneys. So I'm not prosecutorially biased, but I do believe that you're going to be a district attorney, then you got to proceed and you got to pursue and prosecute where you should. You know what Alex Hunter's record as district attorney was in plea bargaining in cases that never went to trial? 98.5%. He was he had no more business being a prosecutor attorney than I have being a ballet dancer, and that's what happened. No, it was John Ramsey. And see, what happens is when you tie something around somebody's neck, unpredictably, there may be pressure.
Before he gets into that, because I think he made a good point there as well. I don't know if you guys have seen it, this show called Your Honor on Netflix. But we were watching it the other day. I think we just got done with the first season, but sort of the convolutedness, and that's, I'm not trying to cast, doubt on the legal system in any way. Even though we do read and research and literature about the misfortunes and the biases in the system. It's human nature to be biased. Like, you have to be biased, and so the bias is going to show up somewhere. That's why I research behavior, because there are biases. And so, Your Honor, the point that I'm making with Your Honor is the fact that because of biases and needs to protect something, people can be bought, people can be manipulated. And even though it's a TV show, I think it's a very good example about how manipulation and bribery starts. Once it gets going, it just goes down a rabbit hole if you don't stop it. And the bad thing about bribery and contamination of evidence in the crime scene and things of that nature, once you get going, people ask all kinds of questions, and then you got to lie over here, you got to lie over there, you got to mislead people here, you got to mislead people there, and then you got to start telling a lie to cover another lie. I think and this is my opinion, I think that's what started. I gotta lie here, I gotta lie there, somebody asks you a question about this, and then you have all these people, especially right now online, that are questioning, well, why didn't you guys do this? Well, there was a banana in the corner, and so we had to go get the banana. And the thing about a banana is I'm just asking you what happened to JonBenet. I was asking you what happened down in the basement. Why didn't anybody know about the basement? Well, see, the thing about the basement is nobody really goes down in the basement. You see what I'm saying? So it's like a lie has to beget another lie. And when you start going down that path, you know, you think it looks natural, but it really doesn't. And so when the grand jury says, let's indict them both, and then you come out and for no rhyme or reason, just shut it down and be like, we're not going to do that. There's not enough evidence. DA, I don't want to question you, but what the heck was the grand jury looking at then? Why did you even bring me here if you weren't going to take my opinions? It just doesn't make sense. Because we said, if we're going to trial, the jury of peers said, yo, if you go to trial right now, we think you have enough evidence to move forward. That's what we think. The people think you have enough evidence to move forward. And you would come out and be like, no, we don't. Well, what will we be basing it off then?
Pressure applied for whatever reason, person twists or turns or whatever, so on. Pressure. You have the vagus nerve. There are 12 cranial nerves that emanate from the brain, and the 10th one is called the vagus, right and left. It comes down from inside the neck and enters into the chest cavity and sends fibers to the heart and lungs. As you're sitting here, were you thinking about, gee, I got to tell my lungs to breathe, I got to tell my heart to beat? The brain did it for you. When the brain, when the vagus nerve specifically is irritated, then it may lead to a slowing of the heart, bradycardia, and that bradycardia.
Company I worked with, I was, a startup company. They were using the vagus nerve to measure emotional resonance.
Can lead to cardiac arrhythmia, and the next thing you know, you've got cardiorespiratory arrest. And this is what happened, I'm sure. I forgot to tell you, I did mention the fracture of the skull. What do you think if somebody came up and whacked any one of us on the head and produced a fracture, the top of the skull? And let me tell you before you answer that the part of the brain that keeps us alive is located back here. It's the vital centers, where the respiratory and cardiac centers. So when you have an injury up here, you don't die right away. You die when the brain swells. The brain has no room to go. One of my sons is a neurosurgeon. What they do in these cases many times is they'll actually saw a piece of bone away. They remove a part of the calvarium to let the brain expand.
True.
It's necessary. And they'll deal with repairing it later, because the brain is in a closed cranial vault. And when it swells, then the brain is like a thick liquid. And it goes like a liquid does to its only opening. What's the only opening in the skull? Back here where the spinal cord emerges, the foramen magnum, the large opening at the base. And what happens is when the brain swells and the pressures go down, it pushes those vital centers down into that opening and you die. Okay, so now you got this fracture and you got a person who's breathing and so on and bleeding, right? And the heart is beating and so on. You know how much blood was found in JonBenet Ramsey's head from that 8.5-inch fracture? 7 cc's, which is a teaspoon and a half. What do you think if any one of us got cracked on the head like that? Do you think there might be more than a teaspoon and a half of blood? She was already dead. That blow was inflicted to make it appear that she had been by this brutal. She was already dead from the rope around the neck that produced cardiac arrest.
To wit, why would somebody spend time? Because, you're telling me that this dude drug her through the house, tied her up, did his business, and then whacked over the head, took time to start writing a ransom note. Say I messed up, I screwed it up, I don't want to do it, I'm going to restart it. Went through all this to lie in wait? I'm just a little sick. And then to just like bash over the head and walk out. I'm just a little sick at, allegedly it being John. Dr. Weck thinks it's John, but I'm just, I'm trying to get there. It's just a little rough. And I'm not saying I have any tie to John. I'm not saying it can't be him. I'm just saying like John is just, he's seen from my perspective, and I could be wrong, but he's really well at the poker face thing. And so I could be biased. So we're going to review a little bit more about John, but until next time, take it easy.